This is an art class by Splash, a free youth arts workshop. In this video, we show you how to create a landscape painting in oils. This is part one.
Hello everybody, hello everybody. It's Charlie Newton here one more time for a live Splash art class. How's everybody doing? Hope you're doing good. But anyway, last time we had started a landscape. I want to jump back into this landscape and we're going to paint. We already have done our underpainting. The painting is still wet, so I can work back into this paint very easily. And you find that the different brands have different consistencies and drying times. So what I've done is we laid out, sketched out, and I think I'm going to change this tree a little bit. And so we did our sketch with a light blue. I'm going to get my round brush because there's something about this S-curve of this tree that's very important to the outcome of this picture, and I don't quite have it the way I want it. I want my tree to slant a little bit more. This tree is in my backyard, so I know exactly what it looks like and what it feels like. And I've like exercised by this tree, and I've done all kind of things over the course of the years at this tree. So I want to get certain bend. So I've moved my tree trunk over to the right. So that means I'm going to have to extend my drawing and fill in these spaces. For that I use my small round brush. Now I'm going to just get my number 10, dip it into some yellow. The paint on my palette has dried. The top of it has dried. Fill this in. So sometimes when you go back to your paint, the top of the paint, the outside of the paint will be plastic, very plastic-like and dry. So you just get your palette knife and open it up. To get to the soft paint that's inside. So don't throw the palette away. If you know it's only been a couple of days, it takes oil paint. Now maybe not this brand, but most of your good brands of oil paint to dry all the way through is going to take about 6 months. So I'm pretty confident. You can be pretty confident that there's some wet paint underneath. First thing I want to accomplish today is get the look of a hot day. So I'm going to use my green, permanent green light. And I think I'm going to mix some of that with white. I think I need to soften that paint up as well. And I can allow some of the yellow to get mixed in. I'm just trying to find a color, and I'll know the color when I see it. And the color won't be totally one color, one flat color. It's going to be variations and gradations of a color. maybe not gradations, but variations of this green. Gotta clean my palette knife. I'm just going to add, it's actually pretty difficult to explain what I'm doing now because I'm doing 2 or 3 different things at the same time. I'm just searching for the right color and I'm thinking about grass. Now since the paint is tacky, I can paint on top of this underpainting, which is what I'm doing. This is, you see a lot of the impressionist painting in a similar style. I'm being very careful where I lay my colors. I'm still looking at the light green. I'm not going to paint this exactly the way I see it because I want the painting itself to make sense. So I'm filling in this area. So never be a slave to a picture, a photograph. Let the photograph be your slave. If all you're doing is just recapitulating, that's a big word. I have to, what does that word mean?
What was that?
Recapitulating. Can you explain it to kids?
No.
Okay, if all you're doing is copying and redoing what the camera did, then we don't need you. You know, we can just use the camera. We don't need the artist, the painter, you know. So you always want to enhance the photograph. I took this photograph myself. I'm not a great photographer. But even if this was taken by a professional photographer, a photograph works different than original drawing or painting. It's a different medium. It's an electronic medium, and a camera has one eye, but we have 2 eyes. So we need to remember that sometimes. Okay, I'm going to allow myself to use my the way I do things. But I'm still going to try to keep it pretty basic. So when I'm doing some short brush strokes with my bright brush, it's called bright. It looks like a little square, and the flat looks like more like a rectangle. This would be the flat. And I'm doing my strokes on the grass from top to bottom, the short strokes. So the little brush strokes sort of clues the eye, the viewer's eye. And the person's mind feels everything else in. Right, so right now, I almost don't need the painting, the photograph rather. I need it just to know what to paint next. But now I'm gonna and you can do the same. Just do it your way. There's a little glob of paint there that don't belong. A little glob of dry paint. Painters, a lot of times, will use their fingers at times. Now, some of you, I'm wearing gloves because I've been painting for over 60 years, and it begins to wear on your hands, to dry your hands out and everything, especially in the wintertime. Some people are sensitive to the chemicals that's in this paint, and you might need to wear gloves too. But I want you kids to experiment so that you'll know what oils are. When you go to the art shop, you see that they are very expensive, but that's why people pay a lot for them. Acrylics are more of a modern paint, discovered in the, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, well, in the 60s, I'm not mistaken, because I remember when we first started using them in high school, we used to actually mix our own acrylics. That's how you had to do it. It didn't come in tubes. So, now this is very important, what I'm going to say to you. The reason why you have license, and kids, you don't have this, most kids don't have this problem. But as you get older and you have gained more ability, you have the problem of trying to reproduce a photograph like a photograph. I had that issue. And what that does is it could make your painting go dead. Now, I'm for super realism or whatever, because that used to be my style. And it's possible to stay close to the photograph and your painting not go dead. But most artists, even though it may do a photorealistic, it's called photorealism as well. There's different styles. One is called photorealism. There's a style called super realism. And we saw those styles in the 70s. They didn't stay long. Probably because now a lot of people could do it, I don't know. And if that's what you want to do, some of you want to paint like the old masters, and that's perfectly legitimate. But they still change things because the camera has one eye, and the human eye can see more than the camera. So just keep that in mind. So I'm setting this painting up. I'm painting in layers, and that's the lesson I want you to learn today, to paint in layers. I'm going through the painting process. I'm going to try to stick to my 3 brushes for unity. So I'm actually thinking about painting the tree now. Now these paints they come pretty thin. So it's this is going to be more difficult to do what I want to do with these paints. Excuse me.
It's good to hear you.
Oh, okay. So I'm adding 3 new colors. Burnt umber, ultramarine blue. I want you to get used to using ultramarine blue and not black. And I'm adding sap green for realism. I'm going to see if I can paint this tree in. I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to this burnt umber to try to get a very dark brown. I'm just going to, basically I'm drawing the tree trunk now. Now I'm going to use my flat brush. I'm going to try to draw the branches. I'm going to draw, first I'm going to go back to the tree trunk. Try to fill in some areas. I keep adding burnt sienna to the burnt umber. Notice I'm leaving some yellow. I didn't want to draw on top of that yellow because this paint is so wet. I wanted to make it easier on myself later on. But if your paint is thick enough, you can just paint on top of it, and then you can go back on top of that. You know, I'm going to add some of this sap green to my dark color for harmony. And the eye's going to pick that color up. The eye's going to pick up brown too, even though you don't notice it. Now I'm beginning to paint like I paint. I'm not going to do that, which I'm actually mixing my paint on the canvas, which you can do. But I don't want you to do that. Try that. Just use your palette. So now you can see all your colors and make decisions. Now I'm going to try to use this dark color everywhere that's dark. Black kids know I said don't use black. Black is not a color. Black is a shade. Now I'm actually going to put this brush away get my small brush, clean it off, and paint some limbs, and try to paint in all the dark areas. And when I paint the limbs, I'm going to mix this ultramarine blue with the burnt umber. I barely touched the canvas because I wanted that line. I wanted a decent line. Now, I have brushes smaller than this, but you guys don't. So what you do, you barely touch the tip of your brush. And see, practice, see if you can get some thin, wiggly lines going. Like you might see. Barely touch the canvas, just the tip of your brush. Then you always have to make sure there's no yellow paint on your brush or whatever. If there is, clean your brush off, clean that paint off, and dip it into the brown, because it's going to turn the colors if you neglect to pay attention to what you're doing. Usually, if you're really focused, you can tell if the brush has picked up paint. But you see that the yellow on the brush, I don't want to dip that into my dark colors because it's going to begin to mute that color. So I just wipe that little bit off and then go back. Now I'm just tracing my drawing. Sometimes when you painting, you can since this brush is kind of wide, you can turn the brush to try to get a certain line. I can also thin my paint. I'm going to thin the paint, see how that works. The problem is you have to be careful that the paint is not so thin that it begins to run. Barely touch the canvas. Look at the brush and see if I can paint another line. When you know you have a lot of yellow or a different color on your brush that you don't want, just tap your brush on your rag and wipe that color off. Now normally I would just get a smaller brush to do this, but it's good practice to see what you can do. You know, when you're doing something that's difficult, what happens is it increases your skills. And when it counts, you'll be able to do it. I just want to get the feel of a flower bush. And the feel of nature. The brush touched the canvas just ever so slightly. We're not drawing, so if it don't look like a drawing, that's okay. We're painting. Notice where I'm holding my brush. I'm not holding my brush here. I want to use more than my wrist and my knuckles. I want my elbow in this. And my shoulder, I want my shoulder to be loose. Then I'm going to reach with the brush. So the bottom of that bush is going to be a little thicker, so that it can hold the branches. So all I did was flatten the brush. I didn't use the tip, I used the flat of the brush for that. It's important that I get a lot of little branches on here to make it look a little bit more realistic in the end. I'm making up a lot of these. Some of these, I see like that line, I saw that line, but when I look at the painting, I say, what would make that look better? Remember to wipe any color on your brush that you don't want. Just little rocks here underneath that bush, stones. I'm going to indicate those. The same thing, what's around this tree actually are some stones. You can't really see it because the grass has overgrown it and the other bushes. So you spend all the time you need on this part of the painting, the branches. It's a very important part. Don't rush it. If the branches look sort of realistic, sort of, the way they flow, then the whole painting is going to flow. This is a black walnut tree, by the way. I think I mentioned that last time. What I may do one day, there's a lot of things I want to do I haven't done. This might be one of them. But if I ever have the opportunity, I want to make a table from this tree. That would be beautiful. To me, I'm looking at, remember I talked about texture? How does this feel to your eyes? You may not know what these branches are doing, but it has a certain feel to it. Flow, a certain flow. There's another black walnut tree to the right of this tree that you can't see. But this tree is the major tree. The other ones are a little bit smaller. I'm gonna put a branch there. So with Oreos, you have to be patient. I may finish this today, but if I don't, it's okay. We'll finish it next time. I would love for this yellow to dry more. It's tacky, but it's still kind of soft. But I would love for this to dry more before I go to my next stage. So I'm not in a hurry to paint the leaves. So I'm gonna see if this works, if I can do this. I'm gonna clean this brush off. I'm using my medium to clean the brush. What the medium does is it thins the paint. And that's all I want. I want the paint thin. I don't want to break the molecules. What the brush cleaner does, it breaks up the molecules in the paint. And if I use that and place my brush on here, it would take paint off the canvas. Turpentine does the same thing. So now I'm going to I'm going to be using the burnt umber, the ultramarine blue, and the sap green. And every now and then I may go and get some of this. But I just want to start putting in some dark areas. I see I made a boo-boo here, which I could use, not this time. I know that there's a rock there. I think I'll go ahead and paint those rocks in. All I'm going to do is just use some of this white. It's going to look like this stone. These are scumbling marks. Kids, Splash kids know what I mean by scumbling. Now my photograph is really, I don't like my photograph. Now, an actual photographer could do a better job. I'm going to add some blue into this, some of the sky blue. And by bringing the sky blue down here, hopefully I can unify the painting a little bit. I'm going to get a little yellow. Color bounces around. I think we mentioned that when we was painting the still life. And in your painting, you want to allow the color to bounce around a little bit, like the Impressionists did. Making little short brush strokes. I'm being very careful now with my placement. So I'm then letting different colors of this stone sit next to each other. I'm not just wiping. I'm using strokes. And I'm looking at this kid to see what it looks like to me. So, okay. So there's a lot of overlaying happening here, overlapping, layering. I'm letting that happen. And like the Impressionist, this tends to want to be an Impressionist painting. So that's what the painting seems to be telling me. So I'm letting it go that way. For a long time, I'm just going to be using my round brushes. For larger areas, I'll use the larger brush, which is the number 10. For the smaller areas, I'll use the number 6 brush. Each stroke here represents a leaf in my mind. A leaf in shadow. I'm painting shadows now. When I get close to the rock, I'll paint the rock shadows. So the front side of this painting is in shadow. If you can imagine the leaves of the tree, you're standing under the tree. You know this paint stretches. You don't need a lot of paint. Just use a little bit at a time. You can always squeeze more onto your palette. So now I'm just looking at the darks, and I'm staying on this side of my palette. I can mix this sap green into the brown to make it darker, into the blue to make it darker. So that's what I'm doing now. And today, that's what we're going to finish doing. We're going to paint in most of our darks. And it's difficult to do because the paint underneath is still wet. So I'm having to put the paint on a little bit thick. And I keep tapping my brush. You want to always control. You are in control of the painting. Because you are the one painting. Anything that goes down is what you put down. So remember, you are in control. You can change anything that you want to change. Sometimes you have to stop and just look. You know, sometimes you have to look for hours or days, or sometimes it's only a few minutes you need to look and start again when you have made a decision. I want to get this shadow here. I think I want to do that now, so I'm going to use the paint into this green. I may make it a little lighter. It's not going to be straight out of the tube. And it's the shadow of the tree, so you can still see leaf-like shapes. There's a hedge in the background. I'm going to begin to paint that in. So whenever my brush strokes are horizontal, it's reflecting the shadow, representing the shadow, a shadow on the ground. This is a hot summer day. I'm letting the green on my brush blend in with the yellow on the canvas. It's like a long scumble. I'm lifting the brush so that it can show through. You'll discover these techniques by painting a lot. You're not going to remember everything I'm saying, but you will discover it on your own. I mentioned last time, I'm going from back to front, so everything that's closest to you is basically going to be finished last. So the area behind this tree trunk, that's basically what we consider the middle ground. This is that sap green that I just dipped my brush into. And I'm scumbling with the edge of my brush, the edge. I'm not using the flat part of the brush, but I dab, 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 dab. I'm painting up to that tree, but I can always go back if I need to and overlap, repaint the edge of that tree. I only pay attention to what I'm painting. The area that I'm painting. I'm not freaking out over the details. I'm not even painting any details really. I'm just painting broad areas. I go from the broader areas to the smaller areas in the painting. So stay relaxed and don't freak out. You're not going to see. There's a lot that you won't even see yet. I just wanted to do this painting. This is not so easy. So I just wanted to do this painting, so that's why we're doing it. It's easier when what you're doing is sort of interesting. I know in school a lot of times the thing may not be interesting, but find something interesting about it. Focus on that. And that's what will bring you through, take you through. So this painting, I think you can tell it's going to be about brushstroke. It's all brushstroke, the brushstroke, short brushstrokes. So it's on purpose. Sometimes I see kids using these brushstrokes and they don't have a reason why. Each brushstroke to me represents a leaf. And I'm still using this wide brush. Later on, I'll use the round brush. I'm going to go down here and paint these dark areas in. So I'm going to the foreground now. So what we're doing is I'm setting this painting up, hopefully. I am not per se a landscape painter. I'm a figure painter. So a lot of you landscape painters out there, I'm sure you would do it differently. So every now and then I paint a landscape. Now, what I would do under normal situations, I would stand up, back up, and look at the picture and make a decision about what to do next. I'll end up doing that at the end of this broadcast. This paint goes a long way, kids, so do not squeeze out a whole lot of it. So I'm going to let this painting in a few minutes dry for 2 days. And on Thursday, we'll be back at it. Now this is a student grade paint, so there's only so much you can do with it. But it's a good student grade paint. So you see, painting takes time. And you want to allow all the time you need. So some of these branches are going to be painted in sap green. So I'm freely going from burnt umber to sap green right now to the blue. It's about time for me to get a larger brush. So just got all of my paint is off my palette, and we're close to time to finish. So I'm gonna get this last little bit of paint off my brush. I'm still looking at the dark areas. And what happens with me is I'll find strokes after painting for a while. I'll find the strokes that I'll need to finish the painting. I'll find the brush strokes. And when I do that, the painting goes a lot faster. But right now, I'm just setting the painting up still. I'm just setting it up. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to clean my brushes. Well, it has been fun sharing this time with you. Let's remember, art is for everyone. Bye-bye.